What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Worship Guitar Show. Pleasure to have you on board. We are celebrating NGD, New Gear Day. We have the American Acoustasonic Jazzmaster. I have worked so hard not to spill my guts about and next week we've got this. And then we've also got a little something special here down on the desktop there. We have the quad Cortex. Hang on, you need to kind of go like that. Hang on, let's see if we can do a little bit of that. All right, good. And so we're going to be running through some sounds and walking through some strategies around building sounds both for acoustic and electric on this puppy. And we, of course, are going to be answering your questions because you probably have a number of them. And this is actually the second live stream I've done on the Quad Cortex, and I've since had a lot of time to get to know this unit, and I would imagine your questions are going to be bountiful. So I actually have a lovely Gretsch over here as we potentially need to hop over into some electric stuff. So what is it that we're going to be covering is, first of all, because the acoustic guitar is so important to worship, and by the way, if you're watching this and you don't play at church, not everybody who plays at church just plays at church, so there's going to be a ton of great content. So welcome. And for those of us that are worship folks, obviously the acoustic guitar is an important part of our experience. So what I've got here is the brand new American Acoustasonic Jazzmaster. And just as a quick rundown, there's a 5-way toggle here that basically has 5 positions like a traditional Strat. And then the tone controllers have been relegated to basically, they call it the mod knob. It allows you to shape shift. So at one extreme or the other, you have very specific, basically IRs. And Fender has partnered together with the good folks over at Fishman to create this beautiful system. And what's neat is in between, you can kind of, if you will, shape shift between one extreme, which is one set sound, and the other extreme, which is another set sound, and come up with sounds that have never really existed. And we'll go through some of that. The traditional volume control, but what's really neat is it gives you a huge amount of flexibility. Behind me, I don't think we're going to be using them today, but you're going to see a pair of 112 Mesa Boogie cabinets, and those are loaded with the Celestion FR-LR speakers. 2 different ones, the triple cone and the F12 X200. The triple cone is 150 watts. The F12 X200, as you might have guessed, is 200 watts. And but they work really great. Down over here to my right is the 700 watt Seymour Duncan Power Stage power amp. The idea is that at some point we're going to potentially want to either take a box like the Quad Cortex or whatever and take it into a live setting, and the ability to have some sort of rig with 700 watts is, I think, sufficient. So we're going to also kind of talk a little bit about that strategy. But the main focus is going to be on the Jazzmaster and on the Quad Cortex, as well as bringing in a workflow with this. Because the reality is that it's highly probable that I'll just use a nice healthy number of 30% of the people that are watching this are going to end up scoring a Quad Cortex. So the idea is it's a very sophisticated piece of technology, but yet at the same time, when you have a strategy about using it, it becomes pretty straightforward. It's literally just kind of piecing together the stuff that you want and knowing what you're going for. So we're going to start off on the acoustic front because for worship musicians, this is such an important part of our sound, whether it's for acoustic services or, maybe, every service there's somebody up there strumming an acoustic instrument. The microphones that are on those 2 speaker cabinets back there are DPA 2011Cs. Those are not cheap, but they are great for accurately capturing the essence of what's coming out of the sound source. And with that in mind, what we're wanting to do is really make sure that when we get on the platform, our acoustic guitar sounds great. I'm going somewhere with this. I am in the process of wrapping this very, very deep video around the DPA product line. And in so doing, I spent a bunch of time miking acoustic guitars. And I discovered that if you've got a mediocre acoustic guitar, you put a microphone in front of it, you're going to hear all the mediocrity of that instrument in a very pronounced way. You literally can't get around it. And microphones kind of have this thing. It's kind of like a bad photo. Sometimes it just captures the way you really look versus the way you think you look. The other thing about an acoustic guitar is we have a tendency to hear the sound here. but the rest of the world has a tendency to hear it here, projecting out from the sound hole. And the reality is you can't really play the guitar with your head down in the sound hole, easily at least. And so it's kind of like the same thing guitar players do when they have an amp on the floor. They really don't know what their sound actually sounds like. It's not until you stick your head in front of that amp and or a microphone that you begin to go, that's what my sound actually sounds like. So with that in mind, that little bit of preamble is important because it really sets up the conversation of like piezo or mic'd or whatever. Getting a great acoustic guitar sound is hard to do, both with the traditional piezo approach where it sounds a little brittle, and then when you're trying to mic up the actual character of the instrument. So that said, this guitar, and in combination with the quad Cortex, does a great job of setting that up. So with that said, I'm going to actually, ironically, I'm going to use the piezo in position 2 here, as in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're going to start there, and I'm going to mute the microphone, and hopefully I will remember to unmute the microphone. But I'm just going to play through some sounds. Again, this is the undersaddle bridge pickup on this guitar. Okay, so the first thing the guitar player is going to ask for, but we need more reverb. And in a second, I'm going to hop down in the chat. First of all, hello, everybody. So let me just jump over to here. And what we're going to do is show how incredibly easy this puppy is to use. So in terms of the sound that I put together here, I went for a pretty straightforward thing. And I apologize that my hand is a little red over here, but it makes it so this jumps out a little bit more. So this model right here is just a JC120, and I chose that because it was the most quote-unquote preamp-like of the different amp models that are in here. And I was like, I'm going to be able to get a sufficient tone as a starter, and then I plugged in, I was like, oh, this is great. The other thing that we've got here is we have the modulated reverb, and this for the worship peeps out there is probably going to be the one. Now, there are a couple of things about the way this box works. I'm going to move this up like this, and invariably I'm going to be moving it around a little bit here. But one of my favorite things about this interface is that it's totally, again, as you notice, it's touch sensitive. And so most of the time, I find myself hanging out here. But the deal is that if you take a look at this encoder right there, I can also move that encoder, I should say this, technically this is the encoder, so that's, I guess, the GUI, graphical user interface feedback. So what's neat about that is literally every turn of the encoder, if you take a look right there, numerically it's 1-to-1. I absolutely love that. One of the other things that's great is you've got in the kind of in the upper right hand corner an undo function. That is neat. Now there are a couple of interesting things that I've noticed that I'm not necessarily totally enamored with. So, for example, is once I hit that undo function, it pulled me out of that menu. Some of the things that they're going to be doing with this box, I think, because they've been so busy kind of dealing with COVID and bringing this thing to market, getting some of the nuances dialed. That thing where the screen disappears, there in the world of graphical user interface design, that is an unintended and unexpected result. You press one button, you don't expect your screen to change. Any of you that are in computer world know what I'm talking about. It's a brilliant unit, but stuff like that is just little stuff that you're like, it would be great to be able to set that in a preference. It may actually exist, but by default it doesn't do that, and that is an unintended consequence. You want to be able to stay in that edit menu and not have it pull you back. In any case, inside here, right here, the mix knob, and this is the magic one for us worship folks. Let me turn the mic off. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with it lower, and then you'll hear it brought in. But this one is really where the magic is, this particular reverb. That's kind of rad. But that reverb in there in particular is the one. So first of all, let me bring in the chats. Sorry, I have been working like a madman for a couple of weeks, and so it means that my focus is not always as rocket science as it should be. But all right, so first of all, great to see everybody. Alan, okay, first of all, NTPL, what's going on, Maestro? Hope you're well. I don't know about the Maestro. So, the funny thing is that I am a highly energized person, and basically no doesn't really come easily to me. But honestly, since this is the kind of the worship guitar show, I can just say there was a tremendous amount of spiritual opposition going into this particular broadcast. And it's a different type of thing when you kind of go, it's harder than it's supposed to be. I was like, okay, I know what this is. So thank you for asking. I'm actually doing great. And, spiritual opposition is just one of those things. It feels dirty. And so it's kind of like there was an episode of this TV show that I watch, and one guy was talking about. Oh, right. I'm going to forget the name. But it was talking about when the devil is there, you can smell the smell of sulfur. It's pretty funny. In any case, but I am doing well, and I'm having a great time. So thanks so much. There you go. Melissa, the ever amazing Melissa Doppler. Hello. What's going on, Alan? Great to see you. Chris, hello. Okay. NTPL, again, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Mom, does this thing require batteries? I love that photo. That is so cool. So this is powered on a wall wart, and I can't actually grab that, but you can see the end of the wall wart. It does not. Oh, no, you're talking about the guitar. Aha, this thing. Hang on a second. I am so in quad Cortex land. There we go. So this guy is powered by a built-in battery system. And so, come on, why are you not going away? There we go. So basically right down by where the output jack is, you also have the ability to power this puppy up. And so it's a 5-volt traditional USB micro connection, not to be confused with a USB-C or USB 3. So it's kind of the preceding version, and you can use some sort of kind of wall wart like that. A traditional phone charger may not quite give you as much juice to get a quick charge, but they say it has about 5 hours of battery life. I played this thing for a good 7 hours yesterday. Or had it plugged in for that period of time. And I don't know whether, if you're not playing, whether that, pushes the engine, but like a traditional pedal, when you plug in, it's going to probably start drawing the power. Great question. So the neck shape is awesome. I absolutely, it's kind of like a Strat, but a little tiny bit bigger. Now, I will say that there are certain 50s Strats and Tellies that I've played that have got a nice big V-neck, not to be confused with the baseball neck, but a V-neck, and I actually love those instruments. So I don't mind a neck that, if you will, is deeper, but it's also got, I think it's a little wider, both at the nut and here, and where that matters is as follows. I'm sorry, I'm going to go through the question, which means I am going to jump back and forth a little bit around topics, because that's what I do when I answer questions. So if you have wide pads, or I don't think you're going to be able to see it. Well, there you go. You can see that kind of bulbous growth on my, there you go. That's it. That is callus. And so I have those on all my fingertips from, believe it or not, playing guitar. So what that means is that when I get on an instrument that the neck width is very narrow, it can be a little tiny bit of an issue where I have to be really careful about having a lot of curl and arch to the last joint on my fingertips. So having a slightly wider neck, it's larger, but it's still kind of what they would call a C-shaped Strat, but a little tiny bit bigger, but not much. These strings, actually, Chris asked me this, and first of all, anytime, and I'm not saying this so Chris stops asking me stuff, because I always love it when people ask me stuff, because I always learn, and I love learning. But on the Sweetwater website, they almost always, and they did in this case, list the strings. And so let's see if I can get over here without breaking anything. Let's go here, and who knows, I have to unlock the scene. There we go. And let's go over here, and there we go. We're in Sweetwater land. Okay, so let me increase the size of that a little bit. And you can see I've got kind of outlined there, 11 through 52 Fender. So that, to me, is a really, really big deal. Being able to know the exact strings that came on there, because every string, and you've probably heard me talk about it, has a sonic quality. But if you also think about a magnet and trying to pick up something that has no metal content versus something that is sensitive to magnets, the same thing is true of the materials that go into a string. It's usually not just, well, nickel-plated steel, NPS, right? So nickel and steel are not the same chemical makeup, hence they're nickel and steel. They will have different qualities. That's a great question. The question is that came in there. What's going on, Bill? And I can see overlays as little things come in. And if I ignore your overlay, it's only because I don't want to distract myself which I can do easily. The G string is a wound G string. That's a great question. So the thing about this, though, that it feels like a slightly larger Strat and a little bit like some of my, honestly, like my Jazzmasters. They just have a little bit larger neck. I've got 3 or 4 Jazzmasters, and this has got a little bit more girth to it. But at the same time, one of the challenges that I have personally, I wouldn't say I have small hands, but my thumb is this kind of, my thumb and my pinky are like midgets. And so on certain instruments, if I can't get, there quite often is what I call a D-shaped neck, where a C-shaped neck is rounded here. A D-shaped neck, as I refer to it, has got a little bit of an edge there, a ridge there. That prevents me from getting around and grabbing the jimmy chords. And there's certain chords where I want to put the thumb in the bass, and that becomes a problem. So the neck shape there is super, super important. It's one of the, one of the main things about buying a guitar over the internet is that you don't always know what the neck shape is going to be until you get there. That's an excellent question. I love that photo, by the way. There you go. Yes, it is rechargeable. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it. I spent a lot of years with various Variacs. So yes, Variax I. It is Variax I. That is correct. And if you want to make it short, it's Very I, right? Don't get me started. Alan, do you have an old Mystic? I bought one years ago. Okay. So, hang on a second. Let me not pull everything in. Okay, good. Oh, there we go. We're talking about old phones. That's great. All right. Doug, that sounds like an acoustic that can do electric tones versus the Variax, which is electric and can also do acoustic. So that is a great question. So let me pull up another sound here. I'm going to head over here, and I'm going to go over. So this is an interesting thing. Let me do this, and let me do this. There we go. So I changed over to my AC30 patch, and so I am still in that piezo position. But then what you can do is, as you bring this control up, ironically, the kind of back position, they call that the A. The B is all the way up, which to me is kind of, I guess the idea is you're starting at A and then you dial it in, which makes sense. But the piezo has a gain circuit in it, so we're going to hear that now, and then we'll also move over to the Shawbucker that's in the bridge. The thing about the Shawbucker in the bridge is if you're using a bunch of gain and a bunch of compression, because this is a hollow body, you will get a little bit of squeal if you're not careful. So we're going to start here. All right, now we're going to do the same thing with the Shawbucker in the bridge. I'll start off with it in the non-boosted version, and then it has this drive circuit in there. And you may hear a little squeal, but again, I've got gain on the AC30, which is, hence ACDD. And then as I bring this up, it adds kind of the gain circuit that's in here. I do need to say that I have not EQ'd this preset for this. Well, hang on. All right. Correction. All right, let's get in here. Let's, in theory, this is a third encoder, but it's not. Okay, so there we go. We're going to do this. Sorry, let me bring you in here. I'm going to mute myself, and hopefully I will remember to unmute myself, but you'll hear me dialing in the sound. me mess with this a little bit more. I'm going to swap out the reverb for the mod verb, because I kind of discovered that puppy. So basically, you select whatever. Well, first of all, I can just tap to kind of get back, if you will. Oh, stop that. Done. To this screen. Then I'm going to select the reverb block, and then I'm going to select here, and then you can go change device. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go for the modulated reverb, because that's the one that I've discovered for worship vibe is the best. Oh, snap, I had the mic up. Boy, that sounded like dog meat. Hang on, let me turn the mic down. Okay, so I dug out a Red Bull. All right, hang on a second. So, Alan, hopefully that answers some of those questions. Okay, wow, I almost bought one. Should have bought it. Okay, I'm not sure which one you're talking about. Okay, I think reverb and parallel is best for acoustic, in my opinion. Mom knows best. So the interesting thing is that, yeah, you know... Thanks, Robin. Oh, Ronan. Right. Sorry, my bad. You know, so what Mom is talking about, Mom's got good advice about vegetables and reverb. And the idea is that you can, for front of house, it's one of the reasons, and we'll be going over this. It's one of the things that this unit is on loan from a good friend, Bradford Mitchell. Oh, this is on loan, so it goes back tomorrow. But in the meantime, I'm creating a pretty in-depth demo for this video. And in so doing, I've been pairing up different guitars with this. So one of the things that I don't think I'm going to get a chance to do this time around is create not only just a wet, dry, wet rig, or if you will, a dry and then a parallel reverb, so you can give the front of house engineer the ability to blend the two together, which is huge. My personal preference would actually be to do a wet, dry, dry, wet, where you basically have a stereo image in the center of two guitars that are pulled apart a little bit across the stereo field, such that the lead vocals has this little bed to live in, and then you pan the delays and reverbs, each in stereo, hard left and hard right. And what that does is that it creates, again, the direct signals in the front, and the ambience kind of swirls around. And it's one of the things that when you have a very high quality processor, you really begin to hear the separation of kind of, it's almost like a boat that's floating through the water, and the wake comes off to the side. And it's a absolutely amazing thing. But I don't think with the other things that I need to do that are a little bit more important when I have a chance to do that. But I've thusly been reminded. So thank you, Mom. I appreciate that. Okay. So yeah, I really like how this looks. The funny thing is that there was an episode on Doppler's Gear Garage where we did, one of the saw it on Craigslist or found it on Craigslist, whatever the heck it is, and there was they had this this crazy Dean Flying V, and I was like, I've got to own that guitar, and somebody bought it. It probably sounded terrible, but that's not the point. Does it have a wound G? Yes. Again, we covered that before, but that's a great question. The guitar, of course, not the quad Cortex. Dude. Oh, excellent. Ronin, is it? Oh, of course. No, there's the character. I love that movie, by the way. So in case you guys haven't seen that, you might check it out. Robert De Niro. Need I say more? All right. So there you can hear a little bit of the... There it is. So, but that again is because I have a fair amount of gain on there. What's neat is the piezo doesn't do that. So I'm going to switch between the piezo gained up, which again is basically in the number 1 and number 2 pickup selection. This is the Shawbucker, and this is the undersaddle piezo. And in both those positions, when you bring this puppy up, that brings in a built-in gain circuit. So I'm going to start off on the Shawbucker. I'm going to switch over to the piezo. I, in a live setting, would find myself using the piezo more and then just kind of going and doing some EQ work on it. It's a little bit less pickup-y, but the ability to have no squeal like that. And again, it's kind of like a hollow body, right? It's like if you turn up the gain on a hollow body, guess what? It squeals. It's not anything that Fender got wrong. I must say that is kind of inviting. So the idea is you just got to make sure that you don't and that is in. I switch back to the Shawbucker and you either manage your volume control or you manage that guy, or you just use it. Sorry, there we go. You either manage this guy. Instantly gone, or pull the gain down. Well, unmute the mic. So that unfortunately happens from time to time, and I just have to be totally on it. So obviously I wasn't. My apologies. What I was saying is, if you're over there on Facebook, I will be over in just a minute. The feed doesn't come in automatically like it does on YouTube. In any case, speaking of Bruce Adolph texting me, the idea is we had this conversation. What's it like? What do worship guitar players want to know about this? You know, and one of the things that Bruce, he gave me this. It's actually interesting. Usually he just kind of lets me do my thing, but this time he was like, he posed some really, really smart questions. Not that he doesn't always, but he usually just kind of lets me go off and do my thing, because he usually knows I have a very clear idea about where I'm going, and he gives me the freedom as an employee to kind of do my thing, which I love. That, and he's also discovered that I do best when I don't have a leash on, or at least the leash gives me a lot of room to kind of do my thing. But he was like, you want to think about, as a worship leader or a worship guitar player, could you ditch your acoustic guitar? And could you ditch your acoustic and your electric guitar, both, and use this as one instrument? So the answer was yes, but on the acoustic tones alone, let me not go into demo land yet. Let me answer that question, because that's really pertinent. There are a ton of great sounds that are in there. Why do we have two overlays? Can I do that? Not supposed to be able to. That's weird. There are a ton of great acoustic sounds, and in a minute I'll kind of run through them, and I'll go through the list. As I was mentioning at the top of this video, after spending a bunch of time miking up acoustic guitars, I was just like, I discovered most of my acoustic guitars really sound incredibly mediocre. And you get what you pay for. But it's never been revealed to me as clearly as it was. It's like, you can, once you hear the microphone the way it hears an acoustic guitar, you begin to kind of go, oh, I can hear that. So we're going to be doing a deep dive on the LR bags, their IR thing, where it basically takes a signature of your instrument. Ironically, it does it through the iPhone, and then it basically allows you to create the sound of that instrument mic'd up. And after spending the time that I did with the DPA mics, I was like, can you loan me a guitar that is going to sound better than the ones that I've got? The ones that I've got, you kind of plug them in, and the piezo or piezo, depending on how you pronounce it, does the job just fine. But that's different than the way the guitar organically sounds, and that's what the LR bags folks were really going for. And with the Voice Print DI, you can load them as presets. So it means that, kind of like with this instrument, you can toggle between some different sounds. So with that said, as a standalone, replace the acoustic guitar, cannot go wrong. And once you kind of do a little bit of preset management, as a standalone electric guitar, I'd be happy to do a service like this. I would need to spend some time, just like you saw, that's why I did that, by the way, of just kind of messing with the tones to demonstrate that you can get into the zone, right? That's important. I could say, oh, it can do it, but you kind of heard, it may not necessarily be a Sunday morning vibe. But if we're going to say a Sunday morning vibe, that's worth doing that. So that means more reverb. Let's take a listen. Yes. That's rad. Okay, so the great thing about presets is you could obviously set up your acoustic presets in this, and with your hand, you're switching here, and with your foot, that is my foot moving down there, imitating switching, some sort of sound with my foot. With the stomps, yeah, like wow. So that was pretty easy, right? Cool. Great question. All right. So about the T5. I have a tendency to meander. Somebody commented about that on Saturday's live stream, and I'm trying to do better. The conversation with Bruce Adolph, though, was specifically about that in many ways Taylor started this vibe with the T5. There's actually an earlier version of something that Fender did that was an Acoustasonic that I found one on Reverb. I didn't buy it, but I saw it. So it's not like this is their first entrance in this, and the T5 was kind of the one that people got to know. I never honestly really liked the way that guitar sounded. It's like, how do I say it? I found it sounded bright, and it might have been the guitar player that was playing it, but pretty much every time they played that, I was like, gosh, I wish they were playing something else. But let's just attribute that to the guitar player, because I would probably play one, which I haven't, and love it. I wouldn't go that far, at least the last, but yeah, it's really cool to do it in real time, right? I mean, this is kind of cool. Doug had a Red Bull. Okay, it sounds crazy good. No, thank you, and it's the guitar, so that's cool. All right, looks like you have quad Cortex volume turned all the way up. You didn't for Saturday's show. Do you need to need it turned up for this guitar? That is a very astute and great question. I'm going to answer this and then jump over to Facebook, as promised. So one of the things, and it's an interesting thing when you do a YouTube video versus when you do a live stream. And I mentioned this on Saturday's live stream. There are a couple of liabilities about this box that, 30% of the people watching the stream are going to own this box, bare minimum, maybe more. One of the things is that kind of if you look at traditional Line 6 land, they traditionally gave you 4 foot switches on the floor. And like I said on Saturday, if you can't make it through a gig with 4 presets, buying another modeler is probably not going to solve that problem. It's a matter of learning to really have the control with your hands and the pickup selection and all of that to elicit the myriad of things that are hiding there in, if you will, the velocity layers of the instrument and the tones and the drive that you get by, well, hang on. Within, basically one preset and kind of manipulating the guitar and how hard you hit it and whatnot. that's, available basically, if you got a 5-way switch for all 5 of those positions, then you start obviously engaging drive pedals or turning them on and off. Gives you a huge amount of flexibility. To answer your question, no, this guitar's got plenty of input, and it pretty much lined up about the same, and we'll get a chance to test it in a moment, as the Gretsch over there. And I think they do that by design, right? You don't want to have to use some sort of step-up box for the input level. But there is the ability to set the input on the quad Cortex. What I don't know, because there are a bunch of things to know, but what I don't know is if you can set that on a preset by preset basis, knowing that on one preset you're going to be using your active bass, for example, on another you're going to be using a passive bass. That would be great, and I will actually need to endeavor to find that out as I go back into demo land tonight. So thank you for that, Chris. No. The couple of the liabilities that you want to be concerned with, having been a person that has dropped an iPhone and ended up with splinters of glass in my fingers because I just had to keep using that broken iPhone and getting the last bit out of my grossly overpriced piece of technology. Don't get me started. I love the touchscreen. It's an interesting thing. Since Saturday, I've started using the encoders more, and I love, again, the fact that literally you can feel you can't hear it, but literally it's a click, one-to-one clicking thing as you turn the encoder, and you can feel it kind of go, and it just turns literally kind of one decrement, for lack of a better word. I don't even know what that means, but it sounds like it means the right thing, as you're just kind of going every turn. That is phenomenal. And I need to double check this, but I had one other amazing experience with this thing. I did mention before that when you kind of hit the undo function, which is a great function to have, it kind of closes whatever menu you're in. But I accidentally forgot to save a preset that I'd made because I was like, I don't know, not thinking about it. And I went to another preset and I hit the undo function, and it brought me back to where I was. And I'm 99% positive that it basically was the anti-moron button where we've all done it. We come up with this great sound. We're super excited. Then we switch to another preset. All of a sudden you're like, I just hosed everything I spent, fill in the blank amount of time on. So that is a great function. Of the things that I think are a little bit of an issue, having played in years with drunken lead vocalists, not at church, obviously. I have mentioned this on Saturday. I've got this great Marshall Governor pedal that has not worked since the lead vocalist decided to dig his boot into my into the foot switch, basically mid-set, kind of. He was falling backwards, basically, and he just put the back of his boot into the foot switch, and it's been broken. It's a proprietary foot switch. So the thing is, I am a little concerned about the touchscreen. Stop that. We're fine. Thank you. But most importantly, the biggest liability is this little knob right here. So you asked about it. So I'm sorry it took me so long to get there. I'm working on it. This thing, if that lead vocalist step on this, my guess is that is connected to the motherboard, and the whole thing is just going to go. I don't know that, but if I were building this thing, I would put a motherboard, and I would have that pot probably as part of that motherboard. And then you can just kind of pull it on and off. Chad Boston will have a protector for this, I'm sure. So that problem is solved. The other things I love, and I started to mention this before, the fact that in Line 6 world, you kind of have 4 across the floor. But my concern is that if you're using cowboy boots, or you have, flip-flops on or something, that in trying to get the upper row of encoders, which are also foot switches, right? And by the way, hang on, let's see what happens. Hang on. Oh, look at that. So you saw it in action. So when you see it italicized with the asterisk there. It took me back to that unsaved preset. That, hats off. That's if you've ever spent any time programming a box like this, that's flippin' awesome. All right, so that said, if you're going for the back row foot switches and you do kind of something like I did, you're going to potentially hit this front row. And that's a little bit of a concern. And or then this volume control. And as Chris pointed out, the volume control is kind of the gateway to the kingdom. Now, here's the deal. I love this visual feedback. I'm all about the user interface. And the fact that the line going up and down and the numbers, I think that is one of the... they didn't have to do that, but I love that they did that. That's the sort of stuff that like really floats your boat. You're like, that's really slick. So those are my concerns about that. There's been a bunch of stuff that I've heard Rebea talking about, and that they did a huge amount of quality control testing, and Tom Quayle on the foot switches. But this right here is the point of liability. That's kind of off on its own. I did this on Saturday. They needed to do this. This is the HX Stomp, and we'll be doing this probably next Tuesday. We're going to be, there we go. All right, there we go. Let's look at this right. Let me do this without dropping the guitar, and autofocus, come on. There we go. So this guy right here is the recessed volume knob on HX Stomp. That needed to be there. And they might not have had the space to do it because this thing is about the camera's upside down, so I have to move backwards. It's about yay deep. So there isn't probably a huge amount of room down inside there, which is probably why that's the case. But that recessing that would be the thing to do. And so I'm glad you brought that up. I'm sorry I rabbit trailed on that, but it's actually a really, really important thing to rabbit trail on, in my humble opinion. Facebook. Hello, everybody. Brett, always a pleasure. Look at you. You're always the first person posting, and I love that. Look forward to this since I'm in the market for a new modeling unit. My GT100 is just not cutting it anymore. There are a ton of things out there. I will actually take that bait and say, you know, the GT1000 core is an amazing piece of technology, and there's not enough love given to the Boss people. Same thing with HX Stomp XL, and obviously the quad Cortex. This is about to become the new Strymon. Yeah. For all the good reasons, but sorry, I guess I have to unpack that now. The new Strymon means, not that they're replacing Strymon as a brand, but there was a moment that every guitar player, quote unquote, had to have a Strymon on their board if they wanted to be hipster cool. What a terrible reason to buy a piece of gear. Buy a piece of gear because it's going to do what you need it to do, not for all the other reasons. Moving on. Brett, can you lock buttons so they don't move parameters during live use? So, you know, that's a very interesting thing. So what I have heard is that when you're kind of manipulating the, let me get over to, here we go, there we go. When you're manipulating the foot switches, that apparently, well, there you go. Back up. There we go. That's appropriate for the Worship Guitar Show. Unsaved. Sorry, I've lost my mind. So the idea is when you, let's say, for example, all right. So one of the important things is preset mode, if you toggle this little box here, allows you to jump into scene mode. And this is one of the cool things. So I have, if I basically step on this guy right here, I can now copy this scene from there over to here. And then I can press on this one, and I can copy the scene over to here. And so on this scene, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that guy, and I'm going to bypass it. And then we're just going to exit out there. So now when I toggle between this scene and that scene, it's that easy. I mean, you know, any of us who've dealt with multi-effects, we kind of have done that. Moving back over to Brett. You know, all of these devices are really cool. This one has a bunch of really phenomenal technology under the hood. It's $1,500, $1,600. It's not cheap. The GT1000 core is half the money. And HX Stomp, you know, literally the conversation I had, I was on the phone with my dear friends at Line 6, and I can't wait to do that demo. And I was basically saying I was spending a bunch of time, because I wanted to be transparent, demoing the GT1000 core. And I think it's a phenomenal piece of gear. And by the way, the guy that designed that did the DL4, for those of us who are old enough to remember the DL4, and also the M300 reverb from MXR. Jeff Slingloff is a rock star, and also did the HD 500 and 500X. He's a for real dude, just crazy, and a lovely guy, and also was responsible for the Waza tube amp expander. I digress. The point being is Boss doesn't really get a lot of love in the praise and worship market. And I remember showing up at a church with a GT, because I used the GT stuff on a bunch of the Guitar Hero stuff that I played on. Nobody complained. They still paid me. That's really kind of what it comes down to. Is like, they didn't go, oh, can you go buy some more expensive piece of gear? But I remember in that same period of time, I showed up for a quote-unquote for hire gig at a church that I love to worship with those guys. And they're kind enough to give me an honorarium. But there was a guy there with the fancy pants. I won't mention these super high-end modeling multi-effects, but, he had his $4,000 rack. And, he kind of looked down on the floor and gave me one of those gear page looks. And I was just like, yeah, whatever. It's not about, the gear. It's what you do with it. And all of this stuff is that good. So, I'm sorry that the GT100 isn't doing it for you. I've heard that, the processing difference between the 100 and the 1000 is significant. Shane, my dear friend, great to see you. Brett, can you, so again, locking the button, reading back down through the chat. So when you're using them as foot switches, which is kind of how I ended up in this little mode here, they don't seem to, they don't have an encoding function. So to answer your question, they're locked down. It's not until you actually press on one of these guys that the encoding functions actually activate, right? It's a great question. And I have to remember that in the little video I'm working on. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that. Okay. Heading down the list here. Go play your bagpipes. You're a funny guy. Yeah, they both do sound really cool. So Alan was talking about the difference between the humbucker, the shawbucker, and the piezo with the gain on there. They're, both of which are totally doable with a little bit of, kind of dressing up. Like, I was actually pretty amazed. I'm like, wow, that's totally doable. And to be able to toggle between sounds, I would gleefully use this to not have to take multiple things with me. Okay. Good. Okay. Yeah, the muting thing. Thank you for the feedback. I appreciate that. That's so funny. He forgot again. It's one of those things where it's down on the floor. So I'm so focused on kind of the comments that and you have to be really mindful of every time you turn it on and off. Yeah, that's what I thought too. Okay. Oh, we had spooling. That's not good. All right. Okay. Okay, Chris, hang on. No. This is not just a Metal Zone shirt. This shirt is special. Metal Klon, ladies and gentlemen. Metal Klon. And if you look, it's actually got, you probably can't see it, it's got a little horsey on the front. I saw this and I had to have it. That's so funny. All right. Brad, what's going on? Great to see you. Okay. There we go. And the shirt says Metal Klon, exactly. All right. Good. All right. I've gone. I liked my old DO4. Okay. So now that, there it is. I've seen that look because I didn't have a Strymon. So, it's just, here's the thing. It's part of growing up, right? We sometimes define ourselves by our possessions, and it's really easy to do. It's my friends over at Worship Tutorials. I can't do a live stream. I can't even repeat what they just said. It wasn't off color, but in any case, I can't do a live stream and never mention those guys. When they get their hands on this box, watch out. They design the best presets in the business. Okay, so with that said, you saw me take a moment and work through a strategy here with mapping this stuff out. And what's interesting, hey, give me a moment. Okay, so I'm going to jump over to preset mode, and in theory, all right. By the way, obviously, as you take a look at the UI, you know, A, B, C, D refers to the 4 stomps in, I should say, presets in each of the, A through H. What an idiot, it's only right in front of me. So you have a total of 8, which is actually very convenient to have the ability to go from 1 to 8 without having to bank up or bank down, which is what I'm going to do now. That is a really convenient function. And I'm trying to see DD swirl, Dopsy, Jose. That's really interesting. Oh, right. You have to double press it to get there. So what you've got right there is hey, what's going on, David? So that is right behind me is a legendary amp. Oh, I do have that slide. Hang on. That's not the slide you're looking for. Where are you? All right, there we go. That amp right there is a, if you look at the sticker in the lower right-hand corner, it says Arco Electronics. No, that is not from a gas station that sells CD players. Arco Electronics is the company where this amazing guy named Jose Arredondo modded amplifiers for the most iconic guitar players in LA, and we'll just leave it there. So that's a Jose modded Marshall, formerly owned by John Sykes and formerly owned by Joe Satriani. But it is a very special amplifier. So what you were hearing there was the capture of that. So that's one of the other things that is really cool about this, is the ability to actually, and very quickly and easily capture both amplifiers and pedals. I haven't actually captured any pedals yet, but that's on my to-do list for tonight. And over there is the Steel String Supreme from Vertex Effects. And I'm going to use that in ES335 to just kind of demonstrate some of the different flavors there. But it's pretty darn special. And that, you know, like... I didn't know it could do that either. Holy cow. Oh boy. We have a lot of fun here. Okay. So Captures. There are a bunch of things that it does. Now, I mentioned that I was going to pull out the Gretsch because at some point you probably want to hear this thing with an actual electric guitar. The other thing is, though, I think before then, is it... Where are you hiding? One of the things about this device, there it is that it has 4 available inputs. 2 of the traditional, then you can also use the loops as a point of input. So let me go ahead and mute this, and I'm going to grab a bass. And I'm going to go off screen to do that. I've been getting in the habit of doing that, and I apologize, and my show producer will... I actually don't have a show producer, but if I did, they would be giving me a hard time. But here we go again. I'll be back in a sec. Hey, do that. So what some people don't know is that Douglas Castro, Mr. DSP himself, the neural... I'm looking for some sort of consonants to go along with the neural Neptune, whatever the heck it is. But Doug, let's see, where's my bass tones? There we go, big bottom. But he is responsible for the dark glass. So let me just, hold on, let me just walk you through real quick, just so you can see that. There we go. So basically, I was just kind of walking through. Again, when you toggle between right here, it lets you know that you're in preset mode. And you just toggle, oh, stop that. You hit this little square button here, and it toggles between scenes, stomps, where you just turn individual. It doesn't have to be a stomp. Basically, you have the foot switch associated with whatever effect or model or whatever it is. And then there's preset mode. So I was just basically walking through preset mode here. And Lone Star, I was using, that's a Mesa Boogie Lone Star. Really, really great clean sound for just kind of nice, smooth, clean tones. And that's kind of where I discovered that modulated reverb when I went, ooh, that is where the worship people, I think, are going to be spending their time. But in any case, by the way, you can actually say if it says 2B, when it says B, you don't hit that encoder again. We're going to see. All right, now. Then we just bring this up. Turning the mic off. So that is one of my favorite amps, and that is basically a flip-top SVT. Flip-top Ampeg. And then the cabinet, I went with what I believe was a 115 yet. So it said amped modern. Oops, stop that. Done. And so basically that's a modern 115 Ampeg cabinet. I was surprised, and I'm pretty sure the flip-tops came with a vintage 15-inch speaker. I was surprised that that speaker wasn't in there, but I still had a 15 to work with, and that, you know. Really nice vibe. I love a kind of a vintagey vibe when I'm hanging out in the bass mode, and that did that really well. That's great. What's going on, Matthew? Great to see you. So the it was literally just a matter of going, and hang on, so let's move over to preset D. There shouldn't, that's acoustic. There we go. So unsaved, this is where the unsaved guitar players go to. Yeah. All right. So you basically dial up an amp. So what I did is I just went into the bass, and as it turns out, that particular flip top was the one on the top. I started off with one of these other ones, but you basically just scroll through, in this case, the bass list, or here, the amp list. And it's, very, very cool, the ability to do that. You can also kind of get into, this little icon here is where you can get into either my captures, which is where I've got my JP2C and the Jose amplifier. And then also, then you've got the ability to get to the factory captures 1, and how do I get back there? Oh, there we go, factory captures 2. So that's kind of where the basses lived. But they didn't have the flip top in the captures. So there we go. But David Curran, the guitar player, the bass player, used to be with Elevation, plays with Lauren Daigle, is a big fan of the flip tops. And I'd already spent some time. I did the demo for Universal Audio Ampeg plugin. So I'd spent a bunch of time with both kind of the SVT and the flip top. So I was already familiar with those amps. But it's always, and love them. But it's always nice to hear somebody who you really respect kind of goes, yeah, the flip top vibe is kind of where they live. And since then, like, the flip top kind of has been my place almost before I'll go to an Ampeg. So, I'm sorry, SVT, synonymous. All right. So yes, so to answer your question, the short version is, and this is one of the things about this particular device that's very, very unique. Most of us that have spent time with real amps and or modelers, I traditionally have found that I have to use a compressor quite often to get an amp to just kind of behave and not get overly excited in the transients. I've actually been very surprised at how little I've actually had to use compression to actually elicit those sounds. That said, I think that's about the cue. And by the way, again, this visual feedback here lets you know when you're actually at 0. It's time to move over to the Gretsch. And holy cow, he's breaking stuff. It was new. Kidding. All right, so let's see if I can actually. Good, we're in preset mode. And we're going to go here. What are we looking for? Looking for. I bet you're going to be in the next bank. That's Marsha. There we go. All right, I'm in scene mode now. I haven't actually. There we go. The funny thing is I'm so used to using my headstock tuners. I don't think I've spent that much time actually using the built-in tuner here. But let me tune here first. And some of the sounds that I went for were perhaps a little tiny bit bright compared to where some of you might want to live. So I might spend a little time just doing a little bit of EQing, but look at that. Seems really bright. So hang on a second. Let me get to where I was going to in the midst of all this. All right, so let's see here. All right, so this was one of my points about all this. Oh, and I also didn't have the mic muted, and that doesn't help. So there are, if you take a look right here and right here, you're going to notice I'm toggling between compressors. And again, this is the power of scene. So, all right, let's take a moment and we're going to do a quad Cortex preset management strategy training, because this is an important piece. So basically, I started off with one signal chain, and I kind of went, okay, I kind of like this compressor, but I'm not totally committed. So what I wanted to do was to create the ability to just do an A/B test. So I created a second scene within the same preset and went, okay, I'm going to bring in a different compressor so I can hear the difference between the two. The amazing thing is if you take a look at the amplifier here, when I toggle between, and again, it's going to tell me that I'm on scene B, and this is going to allow me to go to A. There we go. So watch what happens in the amp. There is zero change in the amplifier. Okay, that is to say, you're seeing guitar amp there. It's the AC30. There are no parameters changing on that at all. But listen to the sound of the guitar when I change. It's kind of compressor. That's it. I was like, we all know that you can adjust the tone of certain compressors and there's tone control and all of that. But like really, you know, in the P-dub thing, what I quickly discovered, and that's a great question you had, was that I was like, what are the go-to things that people are going to use for P-dub? So I purposely obviously selected, well, that's going to be an AC30 there. Interestingly enough, I had not yet discovered this guy right here. I had it on Cave, so let's actually flip that puppy out for the modulated. And so what's really interesting is that one compressor to the top, before you added all the candy, made it get really bright. But then you added all the other stuff in there, and all of a sudden it got tamed. And the thing that made it bright was the thing that gave it clarity. It's a very, very funny thing when you start putting the soup together. Great analogy. My wife makes stew. And if you ever take a look at the pieces of meat that go into a stew, if you got served that at a restaurant as a steak, you'd be like, I'm sending that back, and I'm not a send it back kind of guy. Jam, what's going on, my man? Great to see you. Always a pleasure. Hey, so, you know, the thing is that it's a really interesting thing, that bright compressor. At first I was like, let me hear a different compressor, which is why I went down this trail. All right, so what I did is as I started off creating these particular scenes within this preset, let me just get over here, come on, as I basically just mapped out the different scenes, and I started adding different things and then taking them away. So, and it's setting up a strategy. Again, what I did here, if you take a look at, no, that should not be there. Hang on a second, I'm going to turn you off. So this allowed me to basically toggle. Oh, I see. It's following scene state. Hang on a second. All right, I get it. My bad. Basically, what this enables you to do is to A/B between compressor 1 and compressor 2, and just quickly go, which one do I like better? And then you start using that same thing to start building different things. So you'll notice again now. Okay, I'm sorry. Getting ahead of myself. This should be off. Just one sec. I frustrate myself sometimes. All right, so initially I started with the delays and the reverbs off, and I was like, okay, I just want to hear the core tone switching between compressors. And again, that's this. Now, right now, I believe it's Ryan Tedder of One Republic is stalking me on the internet with his monthly course, because I kind of went through the process of getting ready to potentially sign up to watch that. And in one of the promo things, he says something that's very valuable. He says basically every 4 or 8 bars, he adds another element to keep the song moving forward. And that really stuck with me. And one of the things is, as we kind of toggle between the bright compressor and the non-bright compressor, or in this particular case, the opposite order, listen what happens. So specifically utilizing those differences, where the first one I was like, that compressor's really bright, and then all of a sudden when you start digging in, because if I hit softer on it, but that's also the other thing about knowing an AC30. An AC30 is an amp that has jangle and clarity and trance. It's not even classically clarity, but transience on the top. But the bottom end is kind of muddy. So to bring out the top end too much, you're going to get a little too much top end. But by tightening up the bottom end with a compressor, all of a sudden you've kind of taken the whole thing and done like this. And as you start to hit that compressor harder, again, the brighter one, the gain you get there is much better than this. Now that said, if I wanted to again build that rise between the two of them, I would just be careful how I hit the lower gain compressor, or the kind of the one that just has a little less high end to it. The other thing about that is that once you start adding the bass in, sometimes what seems a little overly bright, all of a sudden when you add the drums and the hi-hats that are going to right in the middle of the guitar, and reverb and all that other stuff, all of a sudden that little bit that made the guitar kind of a little pokey, so long as it's not excessive, all of a sudden is actually the thing that allows you to define the guitar part in the mix. You don't want to be overly bright, but they can always pull that back. What's going on, Sahara? Great to see you. So that's it. All right, let's see here. And so, so here's and what's great about this is that if you want to find the somewhere in between point, you just dial it up and go bang bang and it's done, right? But what was interesting is by and sometimes if you don't have enough difference between the two, and depending on where you are on the neck and what you're playing, which guitar you're playing, the ability to have that contrast sometimes can really work for you. And so it's an interesting, that's interesting. First one was too bright. So the idea is you just find that in between point and you kind of go, hey. So, but the idea of then kind of using that to just kind of go, okay, let's make a decision which one I like, and then kind of going over here. I think I'll have a tone control over here. There we go. So there's an EQ right there. So in theory, that is mapped to, there we go. So now what I'm going to do for you, my friend, I'm going to EQ that. You get the point. All right. Cool. Awesome. Look at you, Sahara. That is a great question. So let's find out. I don't think so, but let's find out. Now, what's great about this is I actually don't have a Morgan, but one of the things that I have been doing is capturing some of the amps that I've got here. And the capture process is actually really outstanding. So my guess is there are some people that are going to very quickly use this platform to start creating patches, and my guess is they'll have some sort of marketplace where that stuff is sorry, I'm getting a message from tech support there. Melissa Doppler, that is. I think there's going to be a huge marketplace for these folks, and hopefully, just like, folks like Gem and Worship Tutorials create these great patches, I think there's going to be a lot of people that are just going to be like, just give me a patch that I can plug in and make it sound great. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this thing unfolds, because there's been this nice long gestation period in the midst of COVID. So the amp list for me is good, but not great. It's interesting. Like, you can really see there's a bunch of high gain amplifiers with multiple captures. And there's some places where you're like, oh, okay, I would love to see a vintage Ampeg cabinet. I was surprised not to see that in there, but they'll be adding that stuff. So the fact that the Morgan's not in there doesn't really mean anything, because I was able to capture stuff really, really, really quickly. Like, literally, you go through this. Well, hang on. So let's go into. Here we go. So let's do a new neural capture. So basically, it walks you through this process. So it basically says, your instrument goes into return 1. All right, great. Then the next thing is it says to make sure you've got your output set and or headphones, which I'm not a headphone person. And the next thing is to say, use capture out to go to your device that you're going to capture. And then the next one just goes, okay, now plug basically the output of your device that you're capturing, be it an amp or a pedal, into there. And then confirm, and then you're good to go. And then you hit start capture. And then you can, by the way, you can adjust the levels here and have a ground lift, which is actually a very important feature. You also have the ability to select the input level there, micro instrument. And if you need to, you can apply phantom power when you're on mic mode, which is really cool. So basically, you can use this thing. I'm going to cancel out of here. Come on. I'm all thumbs. There we go. Oh, I just resaved my patch. All right, well, all good. So that process, then once I'd already set that up, and then just basically you hit the start thing, it takes about 2 minutes, and then and you can toggle back and forth between the capture and the sound of actually playing through that signal chain. Mr. Spider. So what I've been using for my captures is the Waza tube amp expander, because that's the other part of this, is how are you going to get out of that device? You can't just plug your speaker output into here. But the Waza tube amp expander is arguably the best suited device for these captures. The reason being is the resonance and the presence controls on the reactive load. What that enables you to do is match. I'm watching myself kill the spider in the loop in the background here. Sorry. Kind of funny to watch that. It's like, I just did that. The ability to fine-tune the reactive load to match the actual power amp section and the way that power amp section interacts with the speaker. So basically kind of in reverse, if you will. If you have the speaker output coming into your reactive load, it's just the speaker output. But if that speaker output can be coupled with the sense of the right type of power amp section, then the information it sends back as if it were actually connected to an actual speaker cabinet and was moving back and forth. There's this relationship that happens on the speaker output. That's basically a huge part of why and how your amp sounds the way that it does, which is why reactive load boxes are so important. But this is the only one on the market that I know of that actually allows you to fine-tune the interaction such that it is actually interacting on the speaker output level with the same responsiveness going into the quote-unquote virtual speaker and sends that information back to the amplifier. This has a higher level of intelligence than the other boxes do. The others are great. I love the two-note stuff in particular, but this, for this particular purpose of being able to match that, I felt was going to enable me to get much closer to what I was going for. And it was virtually indistinguishable. And you might not have been here, but that Marshall amp behind me is a Jose modded Marshall. That's like the holy grail of Marshalls. You just, that's a $20,000 or $30,000 amp on a bad day, because Jose is no longer with us, and those amps are the fashizzle. So I've had a chance to hang out with Joe Morgan. He's a lovely guy. And so the neat thing is being able to capture his amps. I think on one hand, amp manufacturers are excited about technology. On the other hand, I had a conversation with somebody that is in a similar space, and they were like, Helix kind of has done a lot to kill my business. So it's an interesting thing. Talking about the patches, that's hilarious. So, and here's the thing. This is the neat thing is that there's a conversation about oh wow, just being able to jump in and start playing. So I totally get that, and I'm always a little bit overly conscious about. It's one of the things again the worship tutorial folks do so well. Is that they set up patches for single coil guitars and for humbucking. I'm going to actually take a different approach. I'm not going to reveal all the stuff that I'm going to be doing, but my not in any way too slight with the worship tutorial folks who have had over 100,000 downloads. I'm really close friends with those guys, and I love them. And Bradford now writes for the magazine. Actually, in the current issue that's getting ready to go online, he did the Revelation Reverb review, and there's also a video. I am super proud of this kid. Not that he's my kid, but he's awesome. And so we have this great relationship. They are the rock stars in the building when it comes to those presets. There's an ongoing dialogue. Something like, why do people download patches and buy patches? Because they just want to plug in and play music. How's that for an answer? Snarky. So in any case, let me jump over to Facebook here real quick. I hope that answered your question, Sahara. So, but feel free to chime in if there are more. Chris Lewis, finally, nice. I finally got my first Helix a couple of months ago. All right, first of all, Chris Lewis is also known as Critter, and he's one of my dearest friends. So we live just that little bit too far apart. About an hour and a half in each way that makes it so we can't actually hang out like we would. But he's also been a tremendous supporter on the gear front. And better part of a decade ago, I did a thing with Celestion and Eminence and EV called the Ultimate Speaker Demo. And Chris was just invaluable in that, driving down that hour and a half each way to help support. That's a real friend. It's one thing. It's like, hey, you want to meet for burgers? Like that. It's like versus somebody's going to get into a car and drive an hour and a half each way through traffic. That's a bro. So much love. And he's loaned me all sorts of crazy great gear, and it's just been a real great friend. You gotta love that. So here's the thing: is that I think. Oh, there we go. Hold on, I got to be on the right. There we go. Visual feedback helps. There we go. So, this box right here, I am as excited about this as I am about that. Because I have a workflow that lives here. And unlike some folks, and I'm not talking to you, Chris, I don't care how much a piece of gear costs. I just want to be able to get in and have a great time. The great thing about the Quad Cortex is it's definitely been able to do that, and I've really enjoyed that experience. But I've had, I would say if there's a peak, there are two peak moments with Pleasure Sahara. I see, by the way, I see previews come on here of stuff that's in the chat. So, two peak moments with the Helix. Ironically, the one was the first one. My buddy Andrew Bonica loaned me his. I got an email from Joe Satriani's manager saying, "Hey, Phil Collin is going to be coming to Joe's camp, and we would like it. Would you be interested in playing rhythm guitar for Phil Collin?" I was like, yeah. One of my kind of bucket list things was like, I would love to play in Def Leppard. They've kind of been through a bunch of stuff and they've come out on the other side, and they're pretty much, the original band with the exception of Steve Clark. And, they figured out the clean living side of rock and roll, and they're just a great sounding band. So I basically got a chance to play rhythm guitar, won't be the right tone, but I've forgotten the rest. Fortunately, I didn't forget it then, but to be able to kind of be, and not only that, did I get the chance to play rhythm guitar, we basically did the harmony solo together. So I was like, it was my momentary Def Leppard thing. But the thing is, that was literally the first time I'd ever used Helix. My buddy Andrew Bonica, who used to work at Line 6, had loaned me his Helix, and I was like, well, what am I going to use to kind of get that vibe? So I was like, basically in a night, I just dialed up those sounds using some sort of amp, probably a JC120 with some compression and a Boss CE1 chorus, and to kind of get in that vibe, because I think the original track was probably a Rockman. But I knew I could kind of get into that vibe where if you go era appropriate, that's close enough, like the Rockman and the JC120 were kissing cousins. And so you could kind of use one and people would have some forgiveness, and then I used the 2203 Marshall on that. And, literally that was my first experience with the Helix. The other experience was, again, another great Joe Satriani experience. He asked me to play, Joe put out an instrumental backing tracks version of kind of a compilation of this thing. And he asked a bunch of different guitar players to play 2 minutes. So I did that for one of his songs, and blatantly my Helix rack there. And ironically, the sound was a Worship Tutorials patch that I just basically turned all the drive pedals on and tweaked ever so slightly. So if you're going to dare to actually play, not only a Satriani song, but actually know that Joe's going to share it on social media, you have to be pretty confident about the quality of the sound. So, in many ways, our sound and the sound that we carried with us, if you think about the guitar that you wished you'd never sold, or that, the Morgan that you love so much, there's and especially if you've owned and played with that amp a bunch, there is a feeling you have about that era that always lives with you. And so that sensibility about where Helix has enabled me to go as a musician, and Line 6 in general, will always be with me, and they've been tremendous supporters. So, the Quad Cortex is great, but they could never be, honestly, kind of the first love that Helix has been to me. They're going to be a number of things to me. This this box is a cash cow. Like I said on Saturday, I don't do this for the money. I said this to a manufacturer that I'm actively working for right now. I never do this for the money, and they were like, it shows. That was like, I was saying it kind of abstractly, but what's great is overtly, people don't sense that I'm trying to turn them upside down and see how many nickels and dimes more I can kind of shake out of their pockets. You know what it's like when somebody does that to you, and it never feels good. But this box right here, this box is money for me. All these amplifiers here and all this stuff that's sitting here. I don't have a Morgan, but I'm going to find one now. Thank you very much. So thanks for that, Sarah. So it's basically all the stuff that I can capture and make available to people. But this is one of the things I said on Saturday. Just because you've got to put it back on the shelf, I guess. just because you got a vintage big muff doesn't mean it's a great sounding one. So there's what's called part drift on these older instruments. On these older devices. And some, it's like an old Strat. Some of them sound great, and some of them just don't. Just because it's an old Strat doesn't mean it sounds great. So, all right. Let's take a look at the Book of Face here real quick. Henry, what's going on, my man? But then again, Helix 2 is on the way. MIDI, hang on a second. All right. Reading, it never does good to read the chat backwards. The funny thing is, on the feed that comes into to my streaming application, basically Restream takes the feed from YouTube and brings that into Ecamm Live. So I'm always chasing from the top down, but on Facebook it kind of does the opposite thing sometimes. So I have. Okay, this is a great question. I have 3 options: sell my Helix LT and get the Quad Cortex, sell my Helix LT and upgrade to Helix Floor, or keep the Helix LT and get a Morningstar MC6 mini control and use that as an extra stomp for effects. Okay. First of all, let's just have the Line 6 conversation. Does Helix LT not have Command Center? I think it has less processing power and a different screen. Hold on. Let me answer that question for myself. And I should know this, but I've never owned LT. So does Helix LT have Command Center? Because if it has Command Center, then you don't need the MC6. Excuse me. I don't understand the Command Center. Okay. Boy, Reddit just keeps coming up all over. All right. Okay, there we go. There we go. Okay. Give me just one moment. Let me see if I can find... Okay, there we go. Comparing Command Center functionality between Helix Floor and Helix LT. Are they identical or are there differences? Apart from having one expression pedal, as far as I know, they're identical. I have the Floor, but if you download the manuals, you can compare it for yourself. Okay, so here's the thing. So to answer that question, you're able to use the foot switches on your LT instead of Morningstar, and then you would just basically go in and map via MIDI, the same sort of mapping that you would have to do with the Morningstar MC6 editor. Now that said, I mentioned this before, and I'm 99.9% positive next week we're going to be going over HX Stomp XL, which I think, honestly, I think is every bit as cool as the Quad Cortex. Now, why would I say that? Because I have so much time and energy developing workflows for this box. There are some things that are in this box that I should say that aren't in the Quad Cortex that are in this guy, and that includes thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of just playing this thing, knowing how to find my vibe. Now I always love finding a new way to express myself, and this is a great sounding box. But I was on the phone with 2 of the guys from Line 6 who will remain nameless, and I was like, I've been spending some time with the Boss GT1000 Core, which by the way is an amazing piece of technology. And I was saying I really was digging the MC6, and this hadn't been announced yet, nor had it been leaked. And my buddy kind of pulls this into frame because I was talking about the MC6, and basically, if you cover this, it's like, what does that look like? It looks like an MC6. And so, I was saying it would be really cool to kind of, I'm going to be doing some stuff with the MC6 and HX Stomp, and he was just like, well, you might want to not shoot that content yet. And out he pulled this thing. So, this is really cool because I love the form factor of how small HX Stomp is, but I don't like how few buttons it's got. And so this is kind of like the perfect dealio. Let's see if I can get my top-down camera. And a little visual feedback. No. There we go. Take a look at compared size-wise. That's not going to be a very good way to do it, but there, it's a little bit wider. And if I can get it kind of about like that. There you go, to the back there. So, it's just a hair taller as you look at it like that. But, it allows me to take everything that I've done. It allows me to use all the worship tutorials presets that I've got and the ones that I've crafted. I have a very specific methodology about how I use that. So that box right there is very valuable to me. So to answer your question, I would probably say that if you were ever going to sell your Helix LT, this would be as good a time as any to do so. Generally speaking, and quite often people are like, that's the piece I can afford. So I totally get that. But quite often kind of the LTs have a little bit harder time on the resale side of things because somebody somewhere is selling a Helix floor for pennies on the dollar because they got to pay rent. But because of all the changes that are, I think, coming ahead in all these different form factors and, whatnot, I think it's probably a good idea to consider selling the LT. So with that said, what are your options? If you really dig the Line 6 experience, hanging out inside the Line 6 family and picking up a Stomp, which I think you're going to see, for better or worse, you're going to be seeing a bunch of people jettisoning their Line 6 gear for, the, if you will, the Strymon of modelers. For all the good and not as good connotations of what that means. And they're going to have a great time. This is an amazing piece of gear. I actually find... By the way, if you get the scratchy stuff, quite often you can get it to or not. And there you have it. That's why that high E string was being so snappy. So to answer the other implicit question that Chris had earlier, this is kind of, what's buzzing there? There you go. So Sweetwater. If I go to Sweetwater here, so let's say you got a brand new guitar and you're like, oh no, I broke a string. What am I going to do? We're all doomed. So we go over to Sweetwater and we look at American original 60s. Is it 60s? No. 70s Telecaster. I think it's the 70s. Maybe a 60s, 70s Telecaster Custom. It's an American Original Telecaster Custom is going to get us there. I'm able to find out what the exact strings that are on here because I want that tone. And in so doing, there it is. There's the guitar. It's not cheap, but like this guitar, when I go to it, there you go. When you see 3 reviews and it's 5 stars, that means it's a great guitar. So down here, I'm going to find out the strings are, there we go, Fender. NPS stands for nickel-plated silver. Or steel, my bad, nickel-plated steel, not silver. Hey, 10 through 46. So the beauty of that is it means that I know exactly the strings I'm going to need to order. All right. All right. Oh, I didn't know we were having Doug is on remix. That is funny. That's the funniest thing anybody said all day. All right, it's hanging for me too. Sorry about that, Jem. That really, really bums me out. All right, let me head over to the Book of Face here. And it does have Command Center, but I run out of a stomp switch on stomp mode. Oh, yeah, I can see it doing it. All right. Sorry. Video interrupt. Yeah, it is. I wonder if you're buffering while you're watching yourself buffer, if that's double buffering. But that is really annoying. Oh, that's really a giant drag. Okay, I don't know if you can hear me, Henry. It does have command center, but I run out of stomp switch on stomp mode. LT has 8, and oh, got it. So you just have less stomps. Got it. And obviously you're turning things on and off over the course of what you're doing there. Okay. So, Henry, if you love what you're doing, and honestly, the great thing about, I hate watching this thing buffering. Wow, that's really irritating. Now it's just hanging. Ignoring that, the idea, that is really irritating. The idea is that if you're able to do most of the things that you want to do and then are going to work in turn with MIDI to control those other things and are happy with the foot switches, keep using what you're using just, because there's other stuff, there's always going to be other stuff. But if you're wanting some additional layers of functionality, and, one of the things about using a smaller form factor, as opposed to kind of a board-based format, it may be easier to just kind of have a pedal board where you can it's all in one bag or in a case that you can take all that stuff with you. When you're using, it was one of the reasons I don't have a tendency to use Helix floor with some other type of stomps usually. But I will do that with something like, HX Stomp or even HX Stomp XL. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, given everything that's going on here with this buffering here, and I'm watching this thing sitting here hang, which is really unfortunate, I just want to say thank you for hanging out. This has been a lot of fun, and as always, it's a pleasure to have the privilege to hang out with you guys and be here. Hey, what's going on, Bruce? I see you in the feed there. Listening to this while I'm in the shower. Awkward. It's lagging for me too. In any case, what's going on, Tom? So, given all of that, I'm going to bid you a fond adieu, but we're not going to do so without closing in prayer. So, Lord, waiting for you is an important thing. And, patience is a virtue. You talk about it a lot. It's hard to execute. So, Lord, I just pray that anybody that's just kind of going through a season where they're really being forced to wait for you, Lord, I just pray that you remind them that perseverance of just kind of waiting in God's timing. There's everything that we can do on our own strength, and then there's what we can do in your timing, and the two are incomparable. Because one's all about you and one's all about us. So, Lord,